You know how we often catch those headlines about India and Pakistan, the back and forth, the tensions?
Yeah. Exactly. And our goal here isn't, to pick sides or wade into any political debates. Not at all.
No, absolutely not.
Instead, we're going to take a close look at the claims made in this analysis, understand the backdrop of the recent events it describes,
Right.
and explore the potential military thinking involved, all based on the information this detailed source provides.
Okay, so this analysis kicks off with a pretty serious claim. An alleged Pakistani missile strike on May 8th, 2025, supposedly targeting 15 Indian cities, military installations specifically.
Right, that's the claim.
And the source says India's S-400 air defense system, which they've apparently nicknamed Sudbarani.
Interesting name.
Yeah, think of it as an advanced missile shield. It supposedly intercepted and neutralized this attack.
And what's interesting to note immediately is the reaction described, how swift it was. According to the source, India allegedly retaliated. They targeted 9 Pakistani cities.
9 cities, wow.
Yeah, and their focus was reportedly on destroying Chinese-made HQ-9 air defense systems.
Okay, so similar to the S-400, but on the Pakistani side.
Pretty much. And the analysis claims some were even located within Pakistani military cantonments, their bases.
Right.
This rapid, targeted response, it's a key element. It ties into some of the broader strategic ideas we'll explore later on.
And this alleged exchange, it didn't happen in a vacuum, right? It was supposedly sparked by an earlier event.
That's right. India's Operation Sindoor on May 7th, 2025.
Sindoor.
This was reportedly a response to a tragic terrorist attack in Pahalgam that killed 26 people.
Oh, okay. I remember hearing about that.
And Operation Sindoor is described as a joint operation. Indian Army, Air Force, Navy.
All 3 branches involved.
Though our source doesn't really detail the specific roles each played, it emphasizes the joint nature.
Got it.
The scale and precision of Operation Sindoor, as it's described anyway, are quite remarkable.
How so?
The source claims that 80 terrorists were eliminated in just 25 minutes.
25 minutes? That's incredibly fast.
Across 9 different locations in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir Pak.
Wow.
All supposedly happening in the dead of night between 1:05 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. on May 7th.
And these weren't just random targets, presumably.
Apparently not. No, the analysis names some of them and explains why they were chosen.
Okay, like what?
First, Muridke, identified as the headquarters and a training camp of Lashkar-e-Taiba,
Lecce linked to Pahalgam in the Mumbai attacks, right?
Yeah.
Hafiz Saeed's group.
Exactly. The source makes those connections. Then there's Bahawalpur.
Bahawalpur. Jaish-e-Mohammed. Masood Azhar.
That's the one. Alleged home of Masood Azhar and the GEM headquarters. Linked to Pulwama in 2019 and the 2001 Parlon attack.
Right.
The source even mentions reported deaths of 10 family members of Masood Azhar in this operation.
That's quite specific.
It is. We also have Barnola mentioned, reportedly an Lati terrorist attack launching site.
Okay.
And the source indicates other unspecified locations, too, within both Pakistan and Pak, all unified as launch pads, headquarters, or training camps for various groups.
So a coordinated strike on multiple known terrorist infrastructure points.
That's the picture painted. The video apparently contains a full list. This level of claimed detail really suggests a very focused intelligence effort beforehand.
What's interesting is the statement India allegedly made after these strikes. They emphasized it was focused, measured, and non-escalatory, targeting only terrorists, no harm to Pakistani civilians or military.
Yeah, that sounds like very careful messaging, trying to manage the narrative, maybe prevent a wider conflict.
Seems plausible.
However, this operation, it took place against a backdrop of, existing nuclear rhetoric, war threats from Pakistan.
That's always been there, hasn't it?
Pretty much. The source even references Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Pakistan's nuclear program. highlights how long this nuclear dimension has been a factor.
Right.
And the analysis points out that India's actions reportedly went beyond the line of control, the Lhasa in Kashmir.
Oh, beyond the loss.
Even crossing the internationally recognized border, according to the source. And there was apparently even a hint at canceling the Indus Water Treaty.
Whoa, the water treaty. That's huge.
It's a significant agreement, yeah. These are substantial moves that, according to this analysis, suggest a notable shift in India's approach. A harder line, perhaps.
So the video suggests Pakistan then had, what, 2 main options after Operation Sindoor?
Basically, yeah. De-escalate or ramp things up.
And the analysis claims India was prepared for either scenario.
That's the suggestion. Then we hear about the Pakistani Prime Minister reportedly calling Operation Sindoor an act of war.
Strong words.
And the Pakistani Defense Minister stating readiness for an all-out war.
Okay, so the rhetoric definitely heated up.
Adding to this already tense situation, the source mentions alleged cross-border firing by the Pakistani army across the Lhosi in the Poonch region of J&K.
Resulting in casualties.
Tragically, yes. 12 civilian deaths reported. All of this context, it leads us to the core question the analysis poses.
Which is?
If a full-scale war were to erupt, what might India's strategy actually look like? And how could it potentially lead to Pakistan being in a very difficult position? The analysis uses the phrase on its knees in a surprisingly short time frame.
Specifically 24 hours, right. That's the claim.
That's the provocative claim the analysis explores, yeah.
Okay, this is where things get really intriguing. The analysis introduces the idea of a new Indian war strategy, supposedly quite different from the approaches used in 65-71, the Kargil War.
A whole new doctrine.
Apparently. It even draws a parallel to Germany's rapid conquests in World War II.
Blitzkrieg.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The analysis attributes their success to a particular military strategy that made them seem, quote, unbeatable, despite the military limitations imposed after World War I.
Right, the Treaty of Versailles restrictions.
Yeah. And the source claims Pakistan is supposedly aware of this new Indian doctrine.
Aware. Okay, that's interesting.
Which could explain some of their recent military deployments, the analysis suggests.
Ah, the movements we mentioned earlier.
Yes. The Economic Times reportedly tracked significant movements of Pakistani forces, fighter jets, towards Polk and Karachi.
Okay.
Also deployment of SSG commandos, Chinese-made A-100 rocket launchers, KRL-122 missile launchers, advanced F-16s, JF-17s.
A lot of hardware moving around.
Yeah. And the analysis teases that the reason for the specific deployment pattern will be explained later.
Okay, holding that thought.
Hinting it's a defensive reaction to this new Indian strategy.
Makes sense.
And the development of this new Indian strategy is reportedly linked back to the 2001 Indian Parliament attack.
Right, a pivotal moment.
The video then briefly mentions the use of artificial intelligence, AI, in intelligence and defense. Feels a bit like a side note in the source, maybe an ad placement hint, but it does suggest technology plays a role.
Sure, modern warfare relies heavily on tech, AI included.
So the analysis then dives into the critical shift from India's traditional Sundarji doctrine.
Right, the older one.
To what's known as the cold start doctrine.
Cold start, heard that term before.
The perceived failure of Operation Parakram is presented as the big turning point.
Parakram. That was the huge mobilization after the 2001 Parliament attack, wasn't it? But no actual attack followed.
Exactly. A massive buildup, but ultimately stood down. The Sundarji doctrine is described as having a primarily defensive focus.
Okay, defensive how?
Well, the structure involved holding corps units, basically securing the borders, a defensive line.
Oh.
And separate strike corps. These were for offense, but they were based deep inside India, Mathura, Ambala, Bhopal, far from the border.
Ah, so getting them to the front would take time.
Precisely. And the analysis highlights 3 key weaknesses of Sundarji that supposedly made Parakram ineffective.
What were they?
First, slow deployment of those strike corps. Reportedly took up to 3 weeks to get them border ready.
3 weeks? You lose all surprise.
Exactly, the second point. Element of surprise. Gone.
Uh-huh.
And third, the holding corps at the border. They lacked authorization and, crucially, training for offensive actions, purely defensive.
So a slow punch and a shield that couldn't punch back.
Kinda, yeah. And Pakistan allegedly recognized this vulnerability, exploited it even.
Oh.
The analysis mentions that in President Musharraf's speech, January 12, 2002, he condemned terrorism.
Ah, the diplomatic move.
Right. It made any subsequent large-scale Indian counterattack look, well, overly aggressive international.
Lever timing.
Ultimately, India withdrew its forces after a tense 10-month standoff. The key lesson, according to the source, Sundarji was outdated, obsolete.
Which led to?
The development of the Cold Start Doctrine, reportedly around 2004.
Okay.
And the analysis stresses its strong inspiration from Germany's Blitzkrieg in World War II.
Right, Blitzkrieg. Speed, surprise, synchronized attacks.
That's it. Overwhelm the enemy rapidly. Germany's swift conquest of Europe, especially France, is the classic example.
France had the Maginot Line, didn't they?
Yeah.
Supposedly impenetrable.
Exactly. Massive fortifications, underground facilities, supposedly nuke-proof even.
And yet,
Germany's post-WWI army was actually numerically smaller than France's.
that's a crucial point. So how did they do it?
The analysis explains Germany used limited resources plus the Blitzkrieg strategy to bypass those defenses. Surprise was key.
How?
Attacking through the Ardennes forest. The French thought it was impassable for tanks.
Ah, the unexpected route.
Yep. Specialized German engineer units were vital clearing paths, building bridges quickly, like across the Meuse River.
Okay.
Then, panzer tank units broke through French lines rapidly. Speed was astonishing, 50 kilometers a day, reportedly.
50 kilometers a day. Wow.
Crossed the Ardennes in just 2 days. And finally, synchronized attacks. The Luftwaffe, German Air Force.
Juka dive bombers.
Exactly. Heavy airstrikes overwhelming French defenses simultaneously with the ground assault.
A combined arms approach.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The result, France fell in just 6 weeks. Shockingly fast, culminating in the Nazi flag over the Palace of Versailles.
Symbolic.
Very. And the analysis explicitly states India's Cold Start Doctrine is based on these same principles. Surprise, speed, synchronized attacks.
Okay, so basically importing Blitzkrieg principles for the India-Pakistan context.
That's the core idea presented. It even references a research paper by Dr. Walter C. Ladwig at Harvard, comparing Sundarji and Cold Start.
Ah, academic analysis on it too. What are the key differences Ladwig highlights according to the source?
Well, force size and deployment time, for one.
Right, Sundarji had those large, slow strike corps, 60,000 soldiers.
Yeah, Cold Start envisions smaller, more agile, integrated battle groups, IBGs, about 7,000-8,000 soldiers each.
Much smaller units.
But self-contained. Equipped with their own tanks, artillery, air support, specialized tasks, allows for much faster deployment.
Okay, faster deployment, smaller units. What else?
The shock element. Sundarji's slow pace gave Pakistan time to prepare.
Right, no surprise.
Cold Start aims for rapid, ideally undetected infiltration. Surprise is paramount. Supposedly achievable within 72 hours, the claim goes.
72 hours, still fast. And how about coordination? Army and Air Force.
There's a difference there, too. Sundarji focused more on traditional Army ground ops, capturing deep territory like Lahore or Sialkot.
Which increases the nuclear risk, presumably.
That's the argument. Cold Start, like Blitzkrieg, emphasizes much tighter Army-Air Force coordination, synchronized ops, and the IBGs aim to seize less territory, maybe 40-50 kilometers deep.
Staying below the perceived nuclear threshold.
Exactly. Trying to deter Pakistan from even considering nuclear use by keeping the objectives limited, geographically speaking.
Strategic restraint, almost. And the border forces, the holding corps.
Their role changes, too. Under Sundarji, purely defensive holding corps.
Yeah.
Cold Start redesignates them as pivot corps. They get mobile artillery, battle tanks.
So they have teeth now.
And crucially, they train alongside the IBGs. They're prepared for both defensive and offensive support roles. Much more flexible.
Okay, so faster, more agile, combined arms, limited objectives, and even the border forces are integrated offensively. That's quite a shift.
It really seems like a fundamentally different approach based on this analysis.
Which brings us to that 24-hour scenario. What might the first day look like under Cold Start based on public info.
Right. And it's crucial, as the analysis itself points out, this is hypothetical, built on assumptions from news, research papers.
Not classified intel?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Any real operation would likely be a modified version. But okay, first 24 hours. Speed is key. The analysis compares it to the 2016 Uri surgical strike. Indian forces reportedly moved about 1 kilometer per hour then.
Okay. Slow and stealthy, presumably.
But it estimates these IBGs, with tanks and air support, could move much faster, maybe 3 kilometers per hour.
3 times faster.
Allowing potential infiltration of 15, 18 kilometers into Pakistan within just the first 6 hours.
15, 18 kilometers in 6 hours? That's significant ground. Where would they enter?
Well, Dr. Ladwig's research apparently mentioned 5 potential strike locations.
5 possibilities.
And the analysis connects this back to Pakistan's recent deployments we discussed, heavily concentrated towards Poco and Karachi.
Right, leaving other areas potentially less guarded.
That's the hypothesis. Specifically, the analysis suggests the Sindh to Punjab region might be relatively less defended because of this focus elsewhere.
Exploiting the gaps created by Pakistan's own defensive posture.
Possibly. And past cold start exercises, like Divya Astra and Sangha Shakti, reportedly simulated ops in Pakistan's Punjab and Sindh.
So those regions have been war-gamed under this doctrine before?
Seems so. Suggests India might try to infiltrate from 4 or 5 directions simultaneously, exploiting those potential gaps.
Multiple prongs. And would Pakistan even know immediately?
The analysis, again drawing from the Uri strike, suggests Pakistan might not be fully aware for the first 6 hours.
6 hours of undetected advance.
That's the potential scenario painted. The expectation is Pakistani military activation and counterstrikes, maybe missiles or air power, would start between hours 7 and 12.
Okay, so a window of opportunity before the main response.
And remember that alleged Indian deployment of radar jammers on the western border back on May 1st.
Yeah, you mentioned that. To misguide missiles.
That's the suggested purpose. Plus, reports of Indian Air Force deployments, Rafales, Mirages, Jaguars to the border after Pahalgam.
Getting air power ready.
And even talk of Indian Rafales being scrambled. It echoes the Blitzkrieg model.
Yep.
Airstrikes synchronized with the ground push.
Like Operation Safe Sagar in Kargil, but potentially on a much larger, faster scale.
Exactly. And don't forget the Navy.
Right, the deployment in the Arabian Sea since April.
Recalls the naval blockade during Kargil Operation Tall War. The analysis suggests a similar strategy to choke Pakistani ports could be part of it.
So land, air, and sea pressure potentially all coordinated.
That seems to be the implication of Cold Start. The analysis also throws in reports about Pakistan's alleged vulnerabilities.
Like what?
Limited artillery ammo, maybe only 96 hours worth of intense fighting, fuel shortages for fighter jets.
Logistical constraints, that could be critical.
And their recent request for a big loan, $1.4 billion from China, suggests financial pressures too.
Okay, so paint the picture at, say, 12 to 24 hours in this hypothetical scenario.
If Cold Start is successful, India makes significant gains. The analysis projects Pakistan would likely start threatening nuclear war.
A nuclear card, almost inevitable.
Which would then trigger intense global diplomatic pressure. UN, U.S., China, demanding de-escalation, likely within that 12-24-hour window.
So a very rapid escalation followed by immense international pressure for a ceasefire.
That seems to be the expected dynamic. And India's potential next steps, then.
What does the analysis suggest?
Further financial crippling, international isolation of Pakistan, maybe pushing for a rogue nation or failed state label.
Using the situation to reshape Pakistan's international standing.
And leveraging any captured territory as bargaining chips in negotiations. It's a picture of a swift, decisive, conventional openness aiming for strategic gains before the nuclear threshold is crossed, or international pressure forces a halt.
A very high-stakes gamble, if it were ever implemented.
Extremely. But the analysis also considers the likelihood of this full-scale war actually happening.
Right. Doesn't think it's probable.
It suggests there's actually a strong chance Pakistan might avoid a major conflict, even if India takes action. It points to the 2019 Balakot airstrike as evidence.
The aftermath of Balakot. What specifically?
It recounts the events after Wing Commander Abhinandan was captured. Surge in domestic support in India, strong warnings from the Indian government, military on high alert, and massive diplomatic pressure on Pakistan.
I remember that period. Very tense.
The analysis shares an account attributed to a Pakistani MP, stating the Pakistani army chief seemed visibly distressed. Hands trembling was the quote used, I think. And the foreign minister urged the PM to release Abhinandan because they genuinely feared an imminent, wider Indian attack.
So the release wasn't a peace gesture, according to this source?
No. The analysis frames it purely as a result of fear of Indian military retaliation and global isolation.
Interesting perspective.
And the conclusion drawn is that the current Indian military policy is perceived as one of action, not just threats.
A credible deterrent, perhaps?
That's the implication. The analysis also mentions statements from Pakistani diplomats in the U.S., apparently indicating reluctance to fight a larger India.
Pragmatism kicking in?
Maybe. Plus, the perceived shift in U.S. policy, potentially favoring India more now. It all adds up, suggesting avoiding war is really in Pakistan's best interest.
So they should think very carefully before even smaller attacks, is the underlying message.
That seems to be the conclusion of the analysis, yes. Consider the consequences.
And finally, it touches on Pakistan's internal situation.
Just briefly, lack of unity in provinces like Sindh, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Protests in Poco reportedly increasing after the Pahalgam attack.
Internal fractures could weaken their position further.
Exactly. The analysis mentions another video source goes into more detail on those internal dynamics.
Okay. So quite a comprehensive look at one particular analysis of a potential very aggressive Indian strategy.
Yeah, a deep dive into a detailed, though as we've stressed, hypothetical scenario based entirely on the information presented in that YouTube transcript.
It provides one perspective, one potential view on how a future conflict might unfold, focusing on this alleged shift to cold start.
Definitely food for thought.
It paints a picture focused on speed, coordination, and achieving objectives quickly before things spiral completely.
We certainly hope, profoundly hope, that a full-scale war between India and Pakistan stays firmly in the realm of the hypothetical.
Absolutely. The consequences would be devastating for everyone.
But it does make you wonder, doesn't it? In this incredibly complex, often volatile relationship, is a significant conflict, maybe even a limited but decisive one like envisioned here, perhaps an unavoidable, almost necessary precursor to establishing any kind of lasting peace? Or is that just wishful, dangerous thinking?
That's a really provocative thought to end on. War as a path to peace. It's a deeply unsettling idea.
It is. What do you, listening to this, think? Is conflict sometimes necessary, or is there always another way? We'd be really interested to hear your opinions in the comments.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.